Welcome back to the Viteric Health Podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Joanne, and today we're diving into something that, well, let's be honest, probably affects every single one of our listeners.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about phones and sleep. And spoiler alert, it's not good news for most of us.
Right? So the question we're tackling today is your phone destroying your sleep at night? And honestly, Matt, when we were prepping for this episode, I had to take a long, hard look at my own habits and sigh, it wasn't pretty.
Same here. I mean, who among us hasn't done that thing where you're like, oh, I'll just check one more thing, and suddenly it's 2 a.m. and you're watching videos of cats playing piano or something equally ridiculous.
Oh my God, yes. Or, you know what gets me? When you wake up in the middle of the night and instead of just, going back to sleep like a normal person, you grab your phone to check the time and then somehow end up scrolling through social media for an hour.
Ugh, the midnight scroll. We've all been there. So today, we're going to break down exactly what's happening to our bodies and our brains when we do this stuff. And more importantly, what we can actually do about it without feeling like we need to become monks or something.
Exactly, because let's face it, we're not going to tell you to throw your phone in a drawer and never look at it again. That's just not realistic in 2025. But there are some pretty shocking things about how our phones mess with our sleep that I think a lot of people don't realize.
Okay, so let's start with the obvious question that everyone's probably thinking. How bad is it really? Like, is this just health experts being dramatic or?
Oh, it's bad, Matt. It's really bad. So I've got some stats here that honestly made my jaw drop when I first saw them. We're talking about studies showing that people who use their phones within an hour of bedtime take, on average, 14 minutes longer to fall asleep.
14 minutes doesn't sound that terrible, though.
Right, but that's just the beginning. They also spend significantly less time in deep sleep. That really restorative stuff our bodies need. And here's the kicker. People who sleep with their phones in their bedroom report feeling less rested in the morning, even if they got the same amount of total sleep time.
Wait, so it's not just about the time we're actively using the phone? Just having it there is messing with us?
Exactly. And that's where it gets really interesting from a science perspective. There are actually, let me think, there are like 3 or 4 different ways our phones are sabotaging our sleep. And some of them happen even when we're not actively using the device.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break it down for us.
All right, so the big one that most people have heard about is blue light. But I think there's a lot of confusion about what blue light actually does. So let's start there.
Yeah, because I feel like blue light is bad has become one of those things people just say without really understanding why.
Exactly. So here's what's actually happening. Our brains have this internal clock. It's called our circadian rhythm, and it's basically evolved over thousands of years to respond to natural light patterns. When the sun goes down, our brains start producing melatonin, which is this hormone that makes us feel sleepy.
Right, so far so good.
But blue light, specifically blue light, tricks our brain into thinking it's still daytime. It literally suppresses melatonin production. So when you're scrolling through Instagram at 11 p.m., your brain is like, oh, it must be morning. Time to wake up.
That's actually kind of terrifying when you think about it. We're basically hijacking millions of years of evolution every time we check our phones at night.
Right? And the crazy thing is, it doesn't take much. Studies have shown that even just, I think it was like 30 minutes of phone use before bed can suppress melatonin for up to 3 hours.
3 hours? So if I'm on my phone at 10 p.m., my brain might not start producing melatonin until 1 a.m.?
Potentially, yeah. And that's assuming you stop using it at 10. Most people don't.
Okay, so that's blue light. What are the other ways phones mess with our sleep?
Well, there's the psychological stimulation aspect. Your brain is supposed to be winding down before bed, but instead you're consuming all this information, news, social media updates, work emails.
Oh, God, work emails. Why do we do that to ourselves?
I know, right? But think about it. You're putting your brain in this active, engaged state right when it should be transitioning into sleep mode. It's like trying to fall asleep right after drinking a double espresso.
That's a good analogy. And I'm guessing it's not just any content. Probably some types of content are worse than others.
Oh, absolutely. Anything that triggers strong emotions is particularly bad. So if you're reading news articles about politics or getting into arguments in comment sections, or even just seeing posts that make you feel FOMO or anxiety,
Are those posts that make you angry, the ones?
yes, your brain is releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which are basically the opposite of what you want before bed. It's like your body is preparing for fight or flight when it should be preparing for sleep.
So even if we could somehow eliminate the blue light issue, we still have this problem of just overstimulating our brains at the wrong time?
Exactly. And then there's the third issue, which is it's kind of related but slightly different. It's what researchers call sleep anticipatory anxiety.
That sounds fancy. What does it mean?
So basically, when you use your phone in bed, your brain starts to associate your bed with wakefulness and stimulation instead of sleep. And then you start worrying about whether you'll be able to fall asleep, which, of course, makes it even harder to fall asleep.
Oh, it's like a vicious cycle.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't realize they're doing this. They think they're just relaxing by scrolling through their phone, but they're actually training their brain to be alert and anxious in bed.
Okay, so we've got blue light suppressing melatonin, we've got psychological overstimulation, and we've got this anxiety cycle. Is there more?
Well, there's one more big one, and this might be the most overlooked factor. It's the electromagnetic radiation.
Wait, are we getting into conspiracy theory territory here?
No, this is legitimate research. I'm not talking about phones causing cancer or anything like that, but there have been studies showing that the electromagnetic fields from phones can affect brain activity even when you're not actively using the device.
So just having it next to your bed?
Can potentially disrupt your sleep cycles. Yeah. The research is still developing, but there have been some interesting studies where people who slept with their phones in airplane mode had better sleep quality than people who left them on normal mode.
Huh. So even when we're not looking at the screen, the phone might still be messing with us.
Potentially. And then there's the obvious stuff too, notifications waking you up, the temptation to check your phone if you wake up during the night.
Right. So we've established that phones and sleep don't mix well. But here's the thing. I think most of our listeners probably already suspected this on some level. The real question is, what do we actually do about it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because like you said earlier, we can't just pretend smartphones don't exist. They're too integrated into our lives.
Exactly. So let's talk solutions. And I want to start with the most realistic stuff first, because I think if we jump straight to never use your phone after sunset, people are just going to tune out.
Good point. So let's start with some low-hanging fruit. The easiest thing you can do, and this will make a huge difference for most people, is to stop using your phone for at least 1 hour before you want to be asleep.
Okay, but that's still pretty hard for a lot of people. Any tips for actually sticking to it?
Yeah, so instead of just trying to use willpower, you want to make it as easy as possible. One thing that works really well is charging your phone somewhere outside your bedroom. Like set up a charging station in your kitchen or living room.
That's smart because it removes the temptation entirely.
Exactly. And it forces you to be intentional about phone use. If you want to check something, you have to actually get up and walk to another room. Most of the time, you'll realize it's not that important.
What about people who use their phone as an alarm clock? Because I think that's one of the biggest excuses people have for keeping it in the bedroom.
Yeah, I hear that one a lot. Just buy an actual alarm clock. You can get a basic one for like $15. Or if you want to get fancy, there are these sunrise alarm clocks that gradually increase in brightness to wake you up more naturally.
Those are actually pretty cool. They're supposed to work better than jarring phone alarms anyway, right?
Yeah, they're much gentler on your nervous system. But honestly, even a basic alarm clock is fine. The point is just to remove the excuse for having your phone in the bedroom.
Okay, so phone goes in another room, get a real alarm clock. What else?
Blue light filters. Most phones have them built in now. It's usually called night mode or something like that. You can set it to automatically turn on after sunset.
Does that actually work, though? Because I've heard mixed things about whether those filters are effective.
They're better than nothing, but they're not perfect. The blue light filters on most phones only block some blue light, not all of it. But if you're going to use your phone in the evening anyway, definitely turn it on.
What about those blue light blocking glasses? Are those worth it?
The research it's kind of mixed. Some studies show they help, others don't show much difference. I think part of the problem is that there's huge variation in the quality of the glasses. Some block barely any blue light, others block too much and make everything look orange.
Yeah, I've seen people wearing those super orange glasses. They look like they're about to do some welding.
Right. If you want to try them, look for ones that block at least 90% of blue light in the 400 to 490 nanometer range. But honestly, I think you're better off just reducing phone use before bed rather than trying to make phone use safe with glasses.
That makes sense. What about the content we're consuming? You mentioned earlier that some types of content are worse than others.
Oh yeah, this is huge. If you absolutely have to use your phone before bed, like let's say you're trying to gradually reduce your usage, at least be strategic about what you're looking at.
So what's the best and worst content for before bed?
Worst would be anything that triggers strong emotions. So news, especially political news, social media where people are arguing, work emails, anything that makes you feel anxious or angry or excited.
What about like mindless scrolling, like looking at memes or something?
It's better than reading stressful news, but it's still not great because you're still getting that blue light exposure and your brain is still in this active, engaged state. Plus, mindless scrolling often isn't actually mindless. You're still processing information and making decisions about what to click on.
Fair point. So what would be the least bad phone content before bed?
If you're going to use your phone, things like meditation apps, sleep stories, maybe some calm music. Basically content that's specifically designed to help you relax rather than stimulate you.
Sleep stories are interesting. I've tried those a few times. There's something weirdly effective about listening to someone describe making a cup of tea in excruciating detail.
Right? They work because they're just engaging enough to keep your mind from racing, but not so engaging that they keep you awake. But even then, I'd recommend using audio only and putting the phone face down or in another room so you're not getting the light exposure.
That's a good point. Speaking of audio, what about podcasts? Are those okay before bed?
It depends on the podcast. If it's something calm and not too intellectually stimulating, it can actually be helpful. But you don't want to listen to anything that's going to get you excited or thinking too hard. So maybe not a true crime podcast right before bed.
Yeah, and then they found the body in the basement probably isn't the best lullaby.
Exactly. But something like a meditation podcast or even just, I don't know, a boring educational podcast about the history of accounting or something could actually help some people fall asleep.
Okay, so we've talked about timing, we've talked about content, we've talked about blue light filters. What about the physical stuff? Like, where should people keep their phones if not in the bedroom?
Great question. So ideally, you want it far enough away that you're not tempted to grab it if you wake up in the middle of the night, but close enough that you can still hear it if there's a genuine emergency.
So, like, the next room over?
Yeah, that's usually perfect. Kitchen, living room, home office, somewhere that requires you to actually get out of bed and walk a few steps. That little bit of friction is often enough to make you think twice about whether you really need to check your phone.
And what about people who are worried about missing important calls or texts? Like, what if there's a family emergency?
That's a legitimate concern, but there are ways to handle it. Most phones have a do not disturb mode where you can set it to only ring for certain contacts or if someone calls multiple times in a row.
Oh, that's smart. So you can block the random notifications, but still get through if it's actually urgent.
Exactly. And honestly, think about it. How often do genuine emergencies happen via text at 2 a.m.? Most of the time, the urgent stuff can wait until morning.
True. I think we often overestimate how important we are. Like, the world probably won't end if I don't respond to that work email for 8 hours.
Right. And here's something interesting. A lot of people find that when they stop sleeping with their phones, they actually sleep more deeply and wake up feeling more rested, which makes them more capable of handling whatever issues come up during the day.
That makes sense. Better sleep, better decision making, better problem solving.
Exactly. It's like we're so worried about being available 24/7 that we're actually making ourselves less effective overall.
Okay, so let's talk about the transition period, because I think for a lot of people, the idea of suddenly not having their phone in the bedroom is going to feel pretty anxiety provoking. Any tips for making that adjustment easier?
Yeah, this is where a lot of people struggle. I'd recommend starting gradually. Maybe for the first week, just commit to putting your phone on the other side of the room instead of right next to your bed.
Baby steps.
Exactly. Then maybe the next week, you move it to just outside your bedroom door, then eventually to another room entirely. The key is making small changes that don't feel overwhelming.
What about replacing the bedtime phone habit with something else? Because I think for a lot of people, scrolling through their phone is like it's their wind down ritual.
That's such a good point. You can't just take away a habit without replacing it with something else. So maybe instead of scrolling through your phone, you read a few pages of an actual book, or do some light stretching, or write in a journal.
Or even just lying there and thinking. I know that sounds weird, but I feel like we've kind of lost the ability to just be alone with our thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. That's actually one of the benefits that people often discover when they stop using their phones before bed. They realize they haven't had quiet time to just process their day and think through things.
Although I guess for some people, being alone with their thoughts might be anxiety provoking too.
That's true. If you find that your mind races when you don't have distractions, that might be a sign that you could benefit from some relaxation techniques, deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation, that sort of thing.
Or maybe that's when a meditation app actually would be helpful, as a bridge between phone use and complete digital silence.
Exactly. You can listen to guided meditations with your phone in another room. Get the benefit of the content without the blue light and visual stimulation.
Okay, I want to talk about something that I think is going to be controversial. What about people who say they sleep fine with their phones? Like, I scroll through Instagram for 20 minutes every night and I fall asleep just fine.
Yeah, I hear this a lot. And look, there probably are some people who are less sensitive to blue light or who have developed a tolerance. But here's the thing. Just because you can fall asleep doesn't mean you're getting quality sleep.
What do you mean?
Well, you might be falling asleep, but you might be spending less time in deep sleep or REM sleep. And you might not even realize it because the effects are subtle. You just feel a little groggier, a little less sharp during the day.
So it's like you don't know what you're missing until you experience better sleep.
Exactly. I've had so many people tell me they thought they were sleeping fine until they tried keeping their phone out of the bedroom for a week. Then they realized how much better they could actually feel.
That's interesting. It's like we adapt to suboptimal conditions and think that's normal.
Right. And there's also the question of sleep efficiency. Even if you eventually fall asleep after using your phone, it might be taking you longer than it should. So you're spending more time in bed to get the same amount of actual sleep.
Which is basically wasting time that could be used for other things.
Exactly. And then there's the sleep fragmentation issue. Even if your phone doesn't wake you up directly, having it in the room means you're more likely to check it if you wake up naturally during the night.
Right, and then you're back to square one with the blue light exposure at 3 a.m.
Which is actually worse than blue light exposure in the evening because your melatonin levels are supposed to be at their peak in the middle of the night.
Okay, so let's say someone's convinced and they want to make these changes. Are there any mistakes or pitfalls they should watch out for?
Oh, good question. I think the biggest mistake is trying to change everything at once. Going from sleeping with your phone next to your pillow to suddenly banishing all screens from your bedroom and buying a library's worth of books.
Right, the all or nothing approach usually backfires.
Exactly. Start with one small change and build from there. And don't beat yourself up if you slip up occasionally. The goal is progress, not perfection.
What about the social aspect? Because I think some people worry that if they're not available to respond to messages immediately, people will think they're being rude or irresponsible.
That's actually a really important point. I think we've created this culture where being available 24/7 is seen as normal and responsible, but it's actually not healthy for anyone.
So how do you handle that? Do you need to announce to everyone that you're going to be less responsive at night?
You could, but honestly, most people won't even notice. And if they do notice, you can just say something like, I don't check my phone after 10 p.m., but I'll get back to you first thing in the morning.
And if it's actually urgent, they can call instead of text.
Right, which brings us back to that do not disturb setting we talked about earlier. You can set boundaries while still being available for genuine emergencies.
Okay, before we wrap up, I want to talk about kids and teenagers, because I think this is probably even more of an issue for them, right?
Oh my God, yes. The research on adolescents and phone use before bed it's pretty alarming. Teenagers' brains are still developing, and they're already naturally programmed to stay up later and sleep in later.
Right, so adding phone use on top of that,
Is like throwing gasoline on a fire. Studies are showing that teens who use phones before bed are not only getting less sleep, but they're also more likely to experience anxiety and depression.
and I imagine it's even harder to get teenagers to change their phone habits than adults.
Yeah, good luck with that conversation. But I think the key is explaining the why, not just laying down rules. Teenagers are more likely to cooperate if they understand the science behind it.
And maybe leading by example. Like if parents are scrolling through their phones in bed, it's going to be pretty hypocritical to tell their kids not to do it.
Absolutely. Family phone-free bedrooms can actually be a great way to approach it. Make it a household rule rather than singling out the teenagers.
That's smart. All right, so as we're wrapping up here, let's do a quick summary of the key takeaways. Joanne, what would you say are the top 3 things people should focus on?
Okay. Number 1, stop using your phone for at least an hour before you want to be asleep. That's the big one that will make the most difference for most people.
Number 2?
Keep your phone out of your bedroom entirely. Charge it somewhere else and get a real alarm clock.
And number 3?
If you absolutely have to use your phone in the evening, be strategic about the content. Avoid anything that's going to stress you out or get you emotionally worked up.
Those are good ones. And I'd add a 4th one. Be patient with yourself during the transition. It might take a few weeks to adjust, and that's totally normal.
Yes, and remember, the goal isn't to become a Luddite. It's just to create some boundaries so that technology serves you rather than controlling you.
Exactly. Your phone should be a tool that makes your life better, not something that's sabotaging your sleep and making you feel worse.
And honestly, once you experience what it's like to get really good restorative sleep without the phone interference, you probably won't want to go back.
All right, well, I think that's a wrap for today's episode. This has been really enlightening and honestly a little bit of a wake-up call for me personally.
Same here. I'm definitely going to be more mindful about my own phone habits before bed.
Before we go, quick reminder that if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Viteric Health Podcast. And if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover, you can reach out to us in the comments.
And remember, small changes can make a big difference. You don't have to overhaul your entire life overnight. Just pick one thing we talked about today and try it for a week.
Great advice. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time on the Viteric Health Podcast.
Sleep well.